I opened a secret bank account behind my partner's back, and he found out through a notification he wasn't supposed to see. The notification popped up on my phone while I was standing in the grocery store checkout line, holding a carton of oat milk and a bag of baby carrots. Account ending in 4821, overdraft fee of $36 applied. I stared at the words until they blurred. Not again, not today. My thumb hovered over the banking app icon, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. Not here, not with the cashier waiting, and some guy behind me sighing audibly because I was taking too long to decide between paper or plastic. Paper, please, I said, my voice tight. I shoved my phone face down in my pocket and fumbled for my wallet with hands that suddenly felt numb. The cashier's name tag read Keisha. She gave me a small, tired smile as she bagged my groceries. Rough day? Yeah, I said. You could say that. Outside, the late October air bit through my thin jacket as I loaded the bags into my hatchback. I sat in the driver's seat for a full minute with the engine off, watching my breath fog the windshield. Then I pulled up the banking app. The joint account, Kaylin and Zuri household, showed a balance of negative $87.43. 3 transactions had bounced that morning. My $42.99 contact lens refill from the pharmacy, a $28.50 payment to my student loan servicer that I'd scheduled 2 weeks ago, and a $15.33 charge from the gas station where I'd filled up yesterday afternoon. All declined, all triggering overdraft fees, 6 of them actually, $36 each, $216 gone. Just like that. I scrolled up through the transaction history. There it was, 10:03 a.m. A Venmo payment to Jax_Rider92 for $275. A transfer I hadn't authorized. A transfer I knew nothing about until this moment. My stomach dropped straight through the floor of the car. Kaylin had done it again. I drove home on autopilot, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Our place, a 2-bedroom bungalow we'd rented for the past 18 months, sat at the end of a quiet street lined with maple trees just starting to bleed orange and red. I let myself in through the side gate, my grocery bags rustling with every step. The house was silent. Kaylin worked remotely as a freelance graphic designer, so he was usually here during the day, but his car wasn't in the driveway. Good. I needed a minute. I needed 10 minutes. I needed to not look at his face right this second. I dropped the groceries on the kitchen counter and stood there, even staring at the fridge. A magnet held up a takeout menu from Szechuan Garden. Beneath it, a post-it note in Kaylin's looping handwriting. Babe, running to co-working space to meet Leo about the Henderson project. Back by 3? XOK Leo, his business partner, the guy he'd met at a networking event 6 months ago who supposedly had major connections in the ad world. The same Leo who'd convinced Kaylin to invest $800 in a revolutionary NFT project back in July that had evaporated within weeks. The same Leo who'd encouraged him to take a risk on that vintage motorcycle last spring. The one currently sitting in pieces in our detached garage because Kaylin didn't actually know how to rebuild an engine. I pulled out my phone again and opened our shared Google Doc, the one we'd created last February after the first overdraft incident. On household budget V3.2, I'd color-coded everything. Green for fixed expenses, rent, utilities, car insurance. Blue for groceries and household supplies. Yellow for discretionary spending, $400 per month each, no questions asked. Red for savings goals, our emergency fund, my student loans, his credit card debt payoff. At the top, in bold, no single transaction over $200 without discussion. $275 to Jax_Rider92. Who the hell was Jax_Rider92? My hands were shaking now. Not with anger, not yet, but with that cold, creeping dread that comes when you realize a pattern isn't a pattern anymore. It's a policy. The first overdraft 6 months ago, Kaylin had cried. Actually cried, his shoulders shaking, tears tracking through his beard. I'm so sorry, Zuri. I thought the client had paid me already. My calendar was wrong. I'll pay back every penny. He transferred $200 from his personal account that night. I believed him. I'd rubbed his back and told him it was okay. These things happen. The second time, in May, he'd been defensive. It was only $60 over. The bank's algorithm is predatory anyway. And I needed those art supplies for the Miller job. They were having a 1-day sale. He'd still reimbursed it, but it took 3 days of gentle reminders. The third time, last month, he'd barely blinked. Oh yeah, sorry. Forgot we had that water bill due. My bad. He'd said it like he was apologizing for leaving a dish in the sink, not for triggering $144 in fees that wiped out half our grocery budget for the week. I'd sat him down that evening, voice calm, hands folded on the table between us. Kaylin, this is the third time. Well, we need to talk about boundaries with the joint account. It's not just your money anymore. He'd leaned forward, eyes wide and earnest. I know, I get it. I've been stressed about work. But I'm landing bigger clients now. Leo introduced me to this gaming startup. They're talking retainer. Once that kicks in, we'll be flush, I promise. He'd reached across the table and squeezed my knee. You trust me, right? I'd nodded. Of course I trusted him. He was Kaylin, my Kaylin, who'd held my hair back when I got food poisoning on our third date, who remembered how I took my coffee, oat milk, 1 sugar, who'd driven 6 hours through a snowstorm last winter to surprise me for my birthday when I was visiting my parents in Michigan. He was thoughtful in 1,000 small ways. He left notes in my lunch bag. He knew I hated folding fitted sheets, so he always did them. He cried during Pixar movies, but he also had a relationship with money that made my teeth ache. Not because he was greedy or materialistic. He genuinely didn't care about luxury brands or fancy cars, but because he treated cash like it was both infinite and meaningless. A number on a screen that could always be replenished tomorrow. He'd grown up with his single mom constantly scraping by, and I think somewhere deep down he decided that financial anxiety was a choice. That if you just believed hard enough in abundance, abundance would show up. Meanwhile, I'd grown up watching my immigrant parents count every penny, my dad working 2 jobs for 20 years to buy our first house outright. To me, money wasn't abstract. It was security. It was sleep at night. It was not having your electricity shut off in January. I heard the front door open and close. Footsteps in the hallway. My body went rigid. Zuri, you home? Kaylin's voice, warm and familiar. I didn't answer right away. I was staring at my phone screen. At that Venmo transaction to Jax_Ryder92. $275 for what? Concert tickets? A bet? Some crypto scheme Leo had cooked up? He appeared in the kitchen doorway, shrugging off his denim jacket. He was tall, all lean muscle from rock climbing twice a week, his dark curls messy from the wind outside. He smiled when he saw me, that easy lopsided smile that had made my stomach flip the first time I saw it at a friend's barbecue 3 years ago. Hey you, he said, crossing the room to kiss my forehead. He smelled like cold air and coffee. How was your day? I looked up at him, my throat tight. Bye, Kaylin. What's Jax_Ryder92? His smile didn't vanish, but it shifted, just a fraction. A flicker in his eyes, a microsecond of stillness before he recovered. What? Jax_Ryder92. The Venmo payment this morning? $275? He ran a hand through his curls, a gesture I knew meant he was buying time. Oh, that, yeah, sorry. I meant to tell you. It's for the poker tournament this weekend. Entry fee plus some for the side pot. Poker tournament. I repeated the words flatly. You signed us up for a poker tournament without asking me? Not us, he said, leaning against the counter beside me. Just me, but I used the joint account because my personal one was, running low after I paid for Gary's birthday dinner last night. Gary was his oldest friend, his best man when we eventually got married. A genuinely good guy who'd helped Kaylin move 3 times and once driven him to the ER at 3 a.m. when he thought he'd broken his wrist skateboarding. But that wasn't the point. The budget doc says no transactions over $200 without discussion, I said quietly. We agreed on that after last month. I know, he said, waving a hand like he was swatting away a mosquito. But it's not really an expense, it's an investment. I'm good at poker, Zuri. I told you about the tournament I won in college. $500, just like that. He snapped his fingers. This one has a $2,000 first prize. If I win even a fraction of that, it covers the overdraft fees 10 times over. I felt something inside me crack. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet splintering, like ice thinning on a pond. Overdraft fees? I said. Kaylin, did you not check the account today? His expression shifted again. That flicker of uncertainty. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times. I watched his face as he processed it. The bounced payments, the negative balance, the $636 fees stacking up like tombstones. Oh, he said softly. Shit. Yeah, I said. Shit. I didn't realize. He looked up at me, genuine regret in his eyes now. I thought we had more cushion after payday last week. We did, I said, until you spent $400 on those limited edition sneakers Tuesday and $120 at the brewery Wednesday. And now this. My voice was rising despite myself. Kaylin, I had to cancel my contact lens order. My student loan payment bounced. I can't even get gas for my car right now because the transaction failed. He reached for my hand. Babe, I'm sorry. Really. I'll transfer money from my side account tonight. I've got that invoice from Axiom Designs coming any day. Should be $650 at least. You said that last time, I whispered, and the time before, and the invoice still hasn't come through. It will, he said, but his certainty sounded thinner now. He squeezed my fingers. I'll fix this. I always fix it. But as I stood there in our kitchen, his hand warm around mine, I realized with a cold, sinking clarity that he wasn't fixing anything. He was just patching holes in a boat that was slowly, steadily taking on water. And I was the one bailing. Always me. I'll fix this. I always fix it. He said it with such conviction that for a second, just a second, I almost believed him again. That was the thing about Kaylin. He wasn't lying in the way most people lie. He genuinely believed every promise he made in the moment he made it. His optimism was a force of nature, and for 2 years it had been the buoy that kept me afloat during my own darker stretches. The layoff last spring, the anxiety spiral after my grandma died, the 3 months of insomnia that left me hollow-eyed and brittle. He'd held me through all of it. He'd made soup when I couldn't get out of bed. He'd sat with me in silence when words felt like shards of glass in my throat. How could the same person who'd been my anchor now be the one dragging me under? I need to lie down, I said, pulling my hand away. I've got a headache. His face fell. Zuri, come on, don't do that. Do what? The silent treatment. We can talk about this. I'm not giving you the silent treatment, I said, my voice flat. Why, I'm physically nauseous from stress. There's a difference. I walked down the hall to our bedroom and closed the door. Not all the way, just enough to create a boundary. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall where we'd hung a print of a Joshua tree he'd bought me for our 1-year anniversary. For my desert flower, the card had read. I'd cried when I opened it. Now I just felt tired. 20 minutes later, I heard him moving around in the kitchen, running water, opening cabinets, then a soft knock on the doorframe. I transferred $300 from my account, he said quietly, leaning against the door jamb. It should cover the fees and get us back in the black. I also called the bank and got 2 of the fees waived. They said since it was a first-time thing this quarter. It's not the first time this quarter, I said without turning around. It's the third. He was silent for a moment. Then he came and sat beside me on the bed, not touching me. I know, he said, and his voice was different. Smaller. I know it is, and I hate that I keep doing this to you. I really do. I finally looked at him. His eyes were red-rimmed, Not fake crying red, but the tired red of someone who genuinely hates disappointing the person they love. That was the cruelest part. He wasn't a monster. He was just broken in a way I couldn't fix. Why do you do it? I asked softly. Not the overdrafts, the spending, the rules. You helped make them. So why do you keep breaking them? He ran both hands down his face. It's not about the money, he said after a long pause. It's about feeling stuck. When I see something I want, tickets, gear, whatever, it's like for 1 minute I can pretend I'm not drowning in this freelance grind, that I'm not one missed invoice away from disaster, that I'm actually successful. He let out a shaky breath. I know that sounds pathetic. It doesn't sound pathetic, I said truthfully. It sounds lonely. And it did. I'd been so focused on my own anxiety, the bounced payments, the fees, the constant low-grade panic of not knowing if rent would clear, that I hadn't really seen his side of it. The pressure he put on himself to be the creative entrepreneur while watching his friends with steady jobs buy houses and plan weddings. The shame he must feel every time he has to ask his mom for a loan she never expects back. And the way he'd flinch whenever student loans came up because he dropped out of design school sophomore year and still carried that like a secret failure. I'm sorry, he whispered, and this time the tears were real. They tracked slowly down his cheeks. I'm so fucking sorry, Zuri. I'll do better. I swear on my life, I'll do better. I reached for his hand. His fingers were cold. Okay, I said. Okay, let's just reset. Starting today. We ordered Thai food for dinner, our comfort ritual, and watched a dumb reality show with the volume too loud, laughing at all the right moments. For a few hours, it felt normal again. The next morning, I checked the account. His $300 transfer had gone through. The balance was positive. The world hadn't ended. I almost forgot about the Jax_Ryder92 payment entirely until Friday night. And we were at a brewery with our friends Maya and Dev. Maya, who'd been my roommate in college and knew me better than anyone, except Kaylin. Dev, her husband, who worked as an accountant and therefore made me nervous whenever money came up in conversation. We were on our second round of IPAs when Dev's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and did a double take. Whoa, he said. Kaylin, your boy Leo just posted something wild on Instagram. Kaylin, who'd been mid-sentence about a new climbing route he wanted to try, froze. What kind of wild? Dev turned his phone around. It was a story. A video of Leo standing in what looked like a luxury apartment lobby, grinning at the camera. Behind him, a wall of mailboxes gleamed under recessed lighting. Leo was holding up a key fob. Officially moved into the view. Oh, baby! Leo shouted over what sounded like a club remix playing from his phone speaker. $1,600 a month, floor-to-ceiling views, rooftop pool. This is what happens when you bet on yourself. Shout out to my homie Kaylin for the seed money. Couldn't have done it without my ride or die. The video ended. Dev looked up, eyebrows raised. Seed money? Since when are you investing in Leo's housing situation? Kaylin's face had gone completely still. He took a slow sip of his beer. It wasn't an investment, it was a loan. He's paying me back next month when his tax refund comes. Maya, who'd been scrolling on her phone, looked up. Wait, isn't the View that new building downtown? The one with the wait list? Yeah, Dev said. Minimum income requirement is like 80 grand a year. Nah, Leo drives Lyft. The conversation shifted quickly. Maya asking about Dev's work trip, me pretending to be fascinated by the condensation on my glass. But I felt Kaylin retreat beside me. His body went rigid. He stopped making eye contact. When we got home that night, he went straight to his laptop in the living room while I brushed my teeth. I found him 20 minutes later, still at the computer, shoulders hunched. You okay? I asked, hovering in the doorway. He didn't look up. Fine. Kaylin? Finally he turned, and his eyes were hard in a way I'd never seen before. What do you want me to say, Zuri? That Leo's a shithead? Yeah, he is. I know he is. But he's also the only person who's ever believed in my work enough to introduce me to real clients. Without him, I'd still be designing logos for local dog walkers for $50 a pop. I'm not saying he's a bad friend, I said carefully. I'm just confused about the $275. You told me it was for poker. His jaw tightened. It was part of it. He needed help covering first month's rent. I was going to tell you after the tournament. I didn't want you to worry. After the tournament, you were supposedly going to win $2,000? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Kaylin, look at me. Did you actually enter a poker tournament? He looked down at his hands. The silence stretched until it became its own answer. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Not because he'd lied about poker. That was almost forgivable, a white lie to avoid an argument. But because he'd looked me in the eye 2 days ago, tears in his eyes, and promised to do better. And within 48 hours, he'd already broken that promise. Not with a reckless purchase this time, but with a calculated deception. I need to go to bed, I said quietly. Zuri, wait. I said I need to go to bed? I walked down the hall, but I didn't get under the covers. I sat on the edge of the mattress, listening to him move around in the living room. The click of the laptop closing, the sigh as he slumped onto the couch. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I expected him to come to bed, to apologize again, to promise. Promise. He didn't. At 1:17 a.m., I heard the front door open and close softly. I crept to the window and watched him walk down the driveway in his hoodie, phone pressed to his ear. He got in his car and drove away without turning on the headlights until he was halfway down the block. I stood there in the dark for a long time, my arms wrapped around myself. And for the first time, a thought crept in that felt both terrifying and true. What if I can't trust him with my life? Not my heart, my life. The practical, day-to-day reality of bills and groceries and not having my utilities shut off because my partner decided his friend's luxury apartment was more important than my contact lenses. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, scrolled to account settings. Found the option for direct deposit changes. My thumb hovered over the screen. It felt like betrayal. It felt like the end of something. It also felt like the first honest thing I'd done in months. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I dozed in fits and starts, waking every time a car passed on the street outside. My body tensing each time I heard the distant hum of an engine, wondering if it was him coming home. He didn't return until 4:38 a.m. I know because my phone lit up with the time when I heard the soft click of the front door and the careful, deliberate quiet of someone trying not to wake you. I lay rigid in bed, facing the wall, breathing slow and even like I was asleep. I heard him pause in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the faint glow from the hallway for a moment before he turned and went to the couch. At 7:15 a.m., my alarm went off. I showered, dressed, made coffee with mechanical precision. He was still on the couch when I walked into the kitchen, wrapped in the fleece blanket we kept draped over the back of it, one arm flung over his eyes. The smell of stale beer clung to him, even from across the room. "Hey," I said, eyeing my voice neutral. He groaned, arm still over his face. Don't. Don't what? Don't be mad, I have a splitting headache. I poured coffee into my travel mug. I'm not mad, I'm getting ready for work. Silence. Then he sat up slowly, wincing as morning light hit his face through the blinds. His curls were mashed flat on one side. He looked young suddenly, vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache. "Zuri, talk to me." "What do you want me to say?" I kept my eyes on the coffee maker, on the slow drip of dark liquid into the carafe. "You lied to me. You took money from our account for something you knew I'd say no to. You spent the night God knows where after promising, again, that you'd do better." "I was at Leo's," he said quietly. "Just talking. Needed air." "Right. I didn't cheat on you," he said, and then the defensiveness in his voice surprised me. I hadn't even thought that. The betrayal I felt was deeper than infidelity. It was about trust in the mundane, the daily arithmetic of our lives. But his jumping to that conclusion told me something. He knew he'd crossed a line, and he was scrambling to define which line it was. "I know you didn't cheat," I said. "That's not what this is about." "Then what is it about?" He stood up, the blanket pooling at his feet. "Because it feels like you're deciding I'm a bad person over $275. "It's not about the $275, I said, turning to face him finally. "It's about the 6th overdraft fee this year. It's about the bounced student loan payment that's going to ding my credit. It's about you looking me in the eye on Wednesday and crying about how sorry you were. And then by Friday, you'd already decided to lie to me about where that money was going. It's about the fact that I can't pay for gas to get to my job because my own partner emptied our account for his friend's apartment deposit." His face crumpled. Not dramatically, just a slow folding inward, like paper catching flame at the edges. "I didn't think it would overdraft. I thought we had more." "We've had this conversation 6 times, I said, and my voice broke on the last word. 6 times, Kaylin. How many times do we have to have it before you actually hear me?" He didn't answer, just stood there in his rumpled t-shirt, looking at the floor like it might swallow him whole. I grabbed my keys and bag from the hook by the door. "Zuri, I'll be home around 6, I said, and walked out without looking back. Work was a blur. Yeah, and I'm a junior UX designer at a mid-sized tech firm. Mostly wireframes and user testing, the kind of work that requires focus I didn't have today. I kept checking my phone under the desk. No text from him, no calls. At lunch, Maya texted me a photo of her avocado toast with the caption, "Dev says Kaylin's a dumbass, but also says you should talk to a financial therapist together, LOL." I typed out 3 different responses and deleted them all. What was there to say? Yeah, he's a dumbass, felt too harsh, it's complicated, felt like an excuse. I don't know what to do, felt too close to the truth. At 2:30 p.m., my direct deposit hit my personal checking account. The one I'd opened before we moved in together, the one I used for my side freelance work that barely covered my student loan payments. $3,287.42, my entire paycheck. And I stared at the number for a full minute, my thumb hovering over the transfer button. This was it, the point of no return. If I moved this money now into the new savings account I'd opened yesterday afternoon during my lunch break, a secret, shameful act I'd done while sitting in my car with the doors locked, I'd be making a unilateral decision about our finances. I'd be breaking the very trust I was trying to protect. But what was the alternative? Wait for the next overdraft? The next bounce payment? The next tearful promise that would evaporate the moment he saw something shiny? I took a deep breath and initiated the transfer. $3,000 to the new account, Zuri_emergency, leaving just enough in my personal checking to cover my loan payment and a few groceries. My hands shook as I confirmed the transaction. A small part of me expected an alarm to go off, for the bank to flag it as suspicious activity. But nothing happened. Just a quiet confirmation screen. Transfer complete. I felt sick and relieved, and sick again. I didn't tell him that night, or the next day, or the day after. I went through the motions, cooked dinner, watched TV, even initiated sex on Thursday night because the silence between us had become a physical presence in the house, and I didn't know how else to bridge it. He was tender afterward, tracing circles on my shoulder with his thumb, whispering, "I love you," into my hair like he was trying to convince us both it was still true. I said it back. I meant it. That was the worst part. I still loved him. I just didn't trust him. And I was starting to realize those two things might not be able to coexist. The truth came out on Saturday morning. We were at the grocery store, our weekly ritual, pushing a cart through the produce section. He grabbed avocados, squeezing each one with practiced care. I was comparing prices on oat milk when my phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from my banking app, account ending in 7743, direct deposit of $3,287.42 received. I froze. That was my personal account, the one linked to my payroll. The one that should have automatically split my paycheck between joint and personal like we'd set up 18 months ago when we first opened the shared account. But I changed the allocation on Tuesday afternoon, All of it should have gone to the new emergency account, not this one. Unless I pulled up the settings, scrolled through the direct deposit instructions I'd modified on Tuesday, and there it was, a single drop-down menu I'd missed in my panic. Effective date, next pay period, not immediate, not retroactive. My Tuesday changes wouldn't take effect until my next paycheck, 2 weeks from now. This deposit was still governed by the old rules, which meant half of it, $1,643.71, had automatically transferred to the joint account at 2:30 p.m. yesterday. And Kalen, who'd been checking his phone while waiting for me to decide between almond and oat milk, had seen it. His face was pale when I looked up. He wasn't holding the avocados anymore. They sat abandoned in the cart. He just stood there, phone in hand, staring at me like he'd never seen me before. "You changed it," he said. His voice was flat, empty. My mouth went dry. "Kalen, you moved your paycheck." He took a step back, bumping into a display of organic apples. They wobbled, but didn't fall. "You set up a separate account and you moved your entire paycheck into it without telling me." "It's not what you think." "What do I think, Zuri?" His voice cracked on my name. "That you don't trust me? That you think I'm going to steal from you? That after 2 years together, you'd rather hide money from me than just talk to me?" People were looking. An elderly woman picking through bell peppers had paused, her hand hovering midair. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the linoleum floor. "I was going to tell you," I whispered. "When? After you'd emptied the joint account completely? After you'd saved up enough to leave?" "I wasn't going to leave." The words came out louder than I intended. A child in the next aisle turned to stare. I lowered my voice. "I was protecting myself, just for a little while. Until we figured this out." "Figured what out?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound that didn't reach his eyes. "That I'm a fuck-up? We already figured that out. You don't need a secret bank account to know that." He turned and walked away. Not dramatically, just a quiet, defeated stride toward the exit. I stood there frozen for a full minute, my cart still half filled with groceries, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then I abandoned the cart right there between the avocados and the apples and ran after him. He was sitting in his car in the parking lot, forehead pressed against the steering wheel. I tapped on the passenger window. He didn't look up. I opened the door and slid in. "Kalen," I said, "please." He lifted his head slowly. His eyes were red, not from crying, from anger. A cold, quiet anger I'd never seen in him before. Do you have any idea?" he said, voice low and steady. "What it feels like to find out the person you love most in the world has been secretly planning her escape?" "I wasn't planning an escape," I said, tears finally spilling over. "I was planning to survive." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he started the car. "We need to go home," he said. "We need to talk, for real this time. No more promises, no more lies, just truth." And as he pulled out of the parking spot, I realized with a sinking certainty that whatever happened next, our relationship would never be the same. The trust was gone, and I was the one who'd broken it by trying to protect what was left. The drive home was silent except for the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional sniffle I couldn't quite suppress. I watched the neighborhoods blur past, the manicured lawns, the Halloween decorations going up early, a kid on a bike wobbling down a driveway, and felt like I was observing someone else's life through a smudged window. When Kalen pulled into our driveway, he didn't turn off the engine right away, just sat there with his hands at 10 and 2, staring at the garage door like it might reveal some hidden answer. "You first," he said finally, voice rough. "Me first what?" "Tell me why you really did it, not the protecting myself line, the real reason." I unbuckled my seatbelt slowly. I was scared. Of what? That one day I'd wake up and we'd have nothing. That my credit would be ruined because of bounced payments I didn't authorize. That I'd have to choose between groceries and my student loans. That I'd look at you across the dinner table and realize I resented you more than I loved you. The words tumbled out before I could filter them. And the scariest part? That you wouldn't even understand why I was resentful. Because to you, it's just money. But to me, it's safety. It's my parents working until their hands were raw so I could have a life where I didn't have to count pennies. And I'm terrified of losing that. He was quiet for a long time. Then he turned off the car and got out without another word. I followed him inside, my sneakers squeaking on the hardwood floor we'd refinished together last summer. Him sanding, me applying polyurethane, both of us laughing when he tracked sawdust through the entire house. He went straight to the kitchen and filled a glass with water, drank it in 3 long gulps. Then set it down with a thud that made me jump. "You want truth?" he said, turning to face me. "Here's truth. I'm $14,000 in debt." The number hung in the air between us. I blinked. "What?" "Credit cards, mostly. Some medical stuff from when I broke my arm 2 years ago, and my insurance didn't cover the specialist. And a couple grand from that NFT thing with Leo." He ran a hand through his curls, making them stick up in every direction. "I've been paying the minimums every month. Barely. Sometimes I miss a payment and they jack up the interest again. It's a fucking hamster wheel." I sank into one of the kitchen chairs. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," his voice cracked. "Because you come from solid ground, Zuri. Your parents own their house outright. You've never missed a bill in your life. You have a retirement account at 28. How was I supposed to tell you I'm drowning when you look at me like I'm the one who taught you how to swim?" "That's not fair," I whispered. "None of this is fair." He paced to the window and back. "Do you know what it's like to watch you budget? To see you get actual joy out of hitting a savings goal? It makes me feel like a child, like I'm playing house with an adult who actually knows how the world works." He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes glistening. "The first time I overdrew the account, I didn't do it by accident. I knew exactly what I was doing. I transferred $200 to cover a credit card payment that was 2 weeks late. I just Couldn't bear the thought of you seeing that bill in the mail, of you realizing who I really am. The kitchen seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. All this time, the overdrafts, they weren't about reckless spending. Some were, he admitted, sinking into the chair across from me. The sneakers, yeah, that was stupid impulse shit. But most of it, covering debts you didn't know existed, trying to keep my head above water without you noticing I was sinking. He let out a shaky breath. When I told you Leo's tax refund would cover the $275? Total lie. There is no tax refund. He's in worse shape than I am. I needed that money to stop a collections notice from going to our address. I couldn't let you see that. I thought about all the times I'd found unopened mail tucked under the passenger seat of his car. All the times he'd say, "I'll get the bills later," when I brought the stack in from the mailbox. And I'd chalked it up to disorganization. The same guy who lost his keys 3 times a week. But it wasn't disorganization. It was shame. Why didn't you just tell me? My voice was barely audible. We're partners. I would have helped. Helped how? He looked genuinely curious. By adding my debt to your pristine financial life? By watching you calculate how many extra months it would take to buy a house because your boyfriend is a financial disaster? No thanks. He shook his head. I'd rather you be angry about overdraft fees than disappointed in who I am. The cruelty of it settled over me. Not his cruelty, but the situation's. He'd chosen short-term deception over long-term honesty because he believed my love had conditions. And the worst part, he wasn't entirely wrong. I had been judging him, not for the debt itself, but for what I perceived as irresponsibility. I'd rolled my eyes when he forgot to log expenses in our shared spreadsheet. I'd made little comments about adulting when he'd leave dishes in the sink. I'd positioned myself as the responsible one, the stable one, without ever considering that his chaos might have roots deeper than laziness. I'm sorry, I said, and the words felt inadequate but necessary. I'm sorry I made you feel like you couldn't tell me. He let out a humorless laugh. Don't apologize for that. Apologize for opening a secret account behind my back. I'm sorry for that too, I said. But I'm not sorry I did it. Not really. Because Kaylin, I was starting to disappear. Every time I swallowed my anger about another overdraft, I lost a little piece of myself. Every time I pretended it was fine when my loan payment bounced, I became someone I didn't recognize. I set up that account because I needed to remember who I was before I became Kaylin's responsible girlfriend. Before I became the bill payer, the worrier, the one who bails us out. He flinched like I'd struck him. So, this was about you finding yourself? While I was over here thinking you were planning to leave me? It was about survival, I said, my voice breaking. Emotional survival. I love you. God, I love you so much it physically hurts right now, but I can't love you if I'm drowning. And I can't keep bailing you out without drowning myself. He stood up suddenly and walked to the hall closet. I heard rustling. Then he came back holding a shoebox covered in dust. He set it on the table between us like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Open it, he said. Inside were envelopes, dozens of them, organized by month, credit card statements, collection notices. A summons from a small claims court dated last March that I'd never seen. At the bottom, a handwritten list titled Debt Inventory with columns for creditor, balance, interest rate, minimum payment. The total at the bottom, $14,387.64. I've been keeping this for a year, he said quietly. Every time I got a statement, I put it in here instead of opening it. I thought if I didn't look at the numbers, they wouldn't be real. He looked at me, his face stripped bare of all pretense. I'm not asking you to fix this. I'm not even asking you to stay. I'm just showing you the truth. All of it. No more hiding. I reached into the box and pulled out the top envelope. American Express, 30 days past due. My hands trembled as I tore it open. The numbers swam before my eyes. $3,842.19. And then, quietly, without fanfare, something shifted between us. Not forgiveness, that would take time. Not resolution, that was still miles away. But recognition. For the first time, we were seeing each other clearly. Me, with my rigid need for control born of immigrant anxiety. Him, with his chaotic spending born of deep-seated shame. 2 wounded people trying to build a life together without knowing how to show each other their wounds. I don't want to leave you, I said softly, folding the statement and placing it back in the box. But I can't keep living like this either. I know, he said. I know. He reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was damp. Mine was too. What do we do now? I asked. He squeezed my fingers. I don't know, but for the first time today, I actually want to find out. He squeezed my fingers. Mine, I don't know. But for the first time today, I actually want to find out. The words hung between us, fragile as a soap bubble. I wanted to believe them. God, I wanted to. But wanting and believing are 2 different currencies, and I was fresh out of faith. I stood up slowly, my knees stiff from sitting too long. I need air. He didn't try to stop me, just watched as I walked through the living room and out the back door into our tiny yard. The one we planted with lavender and rosemary last spring because I'd read they were drought tolerant and he'd liked how they smelled after rain. I sat on the bottom step of the porch, hugging my knees to my chest, and stared at the patchy grass where he'd tried to grow tomatoes and failed spectacularly. 3 sad plants had yielded exactly 7 cherry tomatoes all summer. He'd presented them to me on a tiny plate like they were caviar. I'd laughed and made a caprese salad with store-bought mozzarella. We'd eaten it on this very step, barefoot, the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange I'd later try to replicate in a design project. Now the tomato cages stood rusted and empty. Like us. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from my banking app, account ending in 7743, transaction declined. Merchant, PG, and E. I stared at the words until they burned into my retrench. The electric bill, due yesterday, automatically drafted from the joint account, which now had less than $200 in it after his $300 transfer barely covered last week's damage. I stood up so fast the world tilted, walked back inside without knocking. Kalen was still at the kitchen table, head in his hands. And he looked up when I entered, his face raw. The electric bill bounced, I said, my voice flat. We're going to get shut off. He went very still. What? PG and E declined 10 minutes ago. We have 10 days before they disconnect service. I pulled up the email on my phone and turned the screen toward him. The language was polite but firm. Final notice. Payment required within 10 calendar days to avoid service interruption. He read it twice. Then he stood up and walked to the sink, bracing his hands against the counter like he might vomit. Shit, 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 shit. Is there enough in your personal account to cover it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He let out a short, bitter laugh. My personal account has $43.27, and a pending Venmo request from Leo for $80. I sank back into my chair. The numbers clicked together in my head with cold precision. Rent was due in 9 days, $2,150. Car insurance next week, $147. My student loan payment I'd have to reschedule again, $289. And now the electric bill, $183.64. We were underwater, not metaphorically, actually, mathematically drowning. What about your mom? I asked quietly. Could she? No? The word came out sharp, final. He turned from the sink, his eyes blazing. Absolutely not. She's on a fixed income, Zuri. She gave me $500 last month for groceries, and I used it to pay a Capital One bill. I haven't told her. I can't ask her again. The shame in his voice was a physical thing, a weight pressing down on both of us. I thought about his mom. My Linda, a sweet woman who'd worked as a dental hygienist for 40 years, and now lived in a modest condo she'd bought outright after his dad left when Kalen was 12. She'd shown up at our door last Christmas with a tin of homemade cookies and a quiet observation that Kalen seemed tired lately. I'd brushed it off, freelancing hours, you know how it is. While he'd forced a smile and changed the subject to her new book club, she'd looked at me then with an expression I couldn't quite place. Not suspicion. Something sadder. Resignation. She knows, doesn't she? I said softly. Your mom knows about the debt. He didn't answer. Just stared out the kitchen window at the neighbor's oak tree, its leaves just beginning to turn gold. The silence was answer enough. How long has she been helping you? Since last November, he whispered. Well, after the medical bills from the arm surgery, she doesn't know the full amount. I've let her think it was just that, the surgery and recovery. I thought about all the times Linda had dropped by with groceries. More than we could eat, always insisting we keep the leftovers. All the times she'd happened to make too much lasagna or soup and brought over containers that lasted us 3 days. I thought it was just maternal love, Southern California moms feeding their children. But it was charity, dignified, disguised charity. And I'd been too self-absorbed in my own financial anxiety to see it. Tears pricked my eyes. Not for myself, but for her. For the quiet dignity of a mother propping up her son without letting him lose face. For the way she must have looked at me sometimes, not with judgment, but with a kind of sorrowful understanding. You don't see it yet, her eyes might have said, but you will. I'm going to call my parents, I said suddenly. Kalen turned sharply. No, absolutely not. Why not? Because I will not have your parents bailing me out. I won't. His jaw tightened. I'd rather live in the dark than owe your dad money. My dad wouldn't bail you out, I said, the truth of it settling heavily in my chest. He'd sit you down and give you a 3-hour lecture about fiscal responsibility while my mom made tea. And then he'd tell me I need to reevaluate my life choices. I looked down at my hands. But I'm not calling them for money. I'm calling them because my mom, she knows people. She volunteers with that nonprofit that helps with debt counseling. Maybe they could. No. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt in front of my chair, taking both my hands in his. His were cold. Zuri, look at me. I appreciate that, I do. But not your parents. Not yet. Please. Why? Because if your parents get involved, it becomes real in a way I'm not ready for. His voice cracked. It becomes the thing your family talks about at Thanksgiving. How's Kalen's debt going? Like it's a pet we're training. I can't survive that kind of pity. It wouldn't be pity, I said, but even as I said it, I knew he was right. My family operated on a different frequency. Practical, solution-oriented, deeply private about financial matters. They'd help, yes. But they'd also quietly adjust their perception of him, file him away under troubled or immature or worse, a risk. And he'd feel it. He'd feel every unspoken judgment like a physical blow. Then what do we do? I asked, my voice small. Because the lights are going off in 10 days. That's not abstract. That's cold showers and no refrigerator and explaining to our landlord why the house is dark when he drives by. He squeezed my hands. I'll pick up extra work. I've got that logo project for the coffee shop. $300 when it's done, and I can sell my camera gear. The Sony's worth at least $800 used. You love that camera, I said softly. I love you more, he said, and the simplicity of it undid me completely. Tears spilled over before I could stop them. I pulled my hands away and covered my face. He stood up and wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. We stayed like that for a long time, me crying silent, shuddering tears, and him holding me so tightly I could feel his heartbeat against my back. Fast, terrified, real. I'm sorry, I whispered into my hands. I'm sorry I opened the account. I'm sorry I gave you a reason to, he said into my hair. We didn't solve anything that afternoon. No magical spreadsheet appeared. No wealthy relative called with an unexpected inheritance. But we sat at that kitchen table for 3 hours while he opened every envelope in the shoebox. One by one, we read each statement aloud. We added up the true totals: the interest, the late fees, the collection agency markups. The number grew from $14,387 to $16,219 by the time we finished. He wrote it on a notepad in his messy scrawl and stared at it like it might bite him. Then he did something I'll never forget. He took a photo of that notepad, the ugly, a terrifying number, and texted it to his mom with a single message. "I'm so sorry I lied to you. I need help." He showed me the screen before hitting send. His thumb hovered over the button for a full minute. I saw the war in his eyes, the shame warring with something newer, something fragile and brave. Then he pressed send. We sat in silence for 7 minutes. 7 excruciating minutes where every second stretched like taffy. Then his phone buzzed. A text from Linda. "I know, baby. I've known since March. Come over tomorrow. We'll figure it out together. And bring Zuri. She should be there too." He showed me the screen. His hands were shaking. "She knew," he whispered. "All this time?" I took the phone from him and typed a reply before he could stop me. "Thank you. We'll be there at 2. Then I put my arms around him and held on while he finally... I truly broke down. Not the performative tears of before, but the deep, guttural sobs of a man who'd been carrying a secret too heavy for one person to bear. I held him until his shoulders stopped shaking, until his breathing evened out, until the late afternoon sun slanted through the kitchen window and painted gold stripes across the floor between us. And when he finally pulled back, his face swollen and raw, he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not love, exactly, though that was there too. Something deeper. Something like awe. "You didn't run," he said, his voice hoarse. "I thought about it," I admitted. "In the grocery store parking lot for about 3 seconds. I thought about getting in my car and just driving to my parents' house, to a hotel, anywhere but here." "Why didn't you?" I thought about the answer carefully. Not the easy answer, because I love you, but the true one. "Because running would have been easier," I said finally. "And we deserve harder than easy right now." He nodded slowly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "Okay," he said. "Okay, then let's do hard." Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. A car door slammed down the street. Ordinary sounds in an ordinary neighborhood. But inside our kitchen, something had shifted. Not fixed, not healed, but acknowledged. The monster was out of the closet now. Ugly and real and covered in debt statements. And for the first time, we were looking at it together instead of pretending it wasn't there. But monsters don't disappear just because you stop ignoring them. And as I sat there holding his hand, while watching the light fade from the sky, I knew the hardest part was still coming. Because truth isn't a solution. It's just the ground you have to stand on while you figure out what to build next. And our ground was cracked and uneven and littered with broken promises. Still, it was ground. And for now, that had to be enough. The next 48 hours passed in a strange, suspended haze, the kind where time both drags and evaporates. We went through the motions. I went to work Monday. Kalen sat at his desk in the living room, sending pitches to every client he'd ever worked with, his shoulders tense even from across the room. We ate dinner together, frozen dumplings boiled in a pot neither of us washed afterward. We slept in the same bed, backs pressed together like 2 parentheses around an empty space. The secret account still existed. The debt still existed, but something had shifted in the atmosphere between us. Not resolution, but a fragile truce. We were no longer hiding from each other, just waiting. Tuesday at 1:45 p.m., we pulled into the driveway of Linda's condo complex, a tidy collection of 2-story buildings with bougainvillea spilling over white stucco walls. Kalen killed the engine, but didn't move. His hand stayed on the wheel, knuckles white. "You don't have to come in," he said quietly. "I can do this alone." "I'm not letting you do this alone," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "We made this mess together. We clean it up together." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the gratitude warring with shame in his eyes. "You're too good for me, Zuri." "Don't," I said softly. "Don't make me the saint in this story. I opened a secret account. Might I stop trusting you? That's not saint behavior." He reached over and squeezed my knee. "It's survival behavior. There's a difference." We walked to her door side by side. Linda answered before we even knocked, as if she'd been watching from the window. She was a small woman with Kalen's same dark curls gone silver at the temples, wearing an apron dusted with flour. She pulled him into a hug first, long, tight, the kind that communicates more than words ever could. When she stepped back, her eyes were glistening, but she turned to me with a gentle smile. "Zuri, thank you for coming." She squeezed my hand. "Come in, both of you. I made coffee cake." Her living room was exactly what you'd expect. Comfortable, slightly cluttered, filled with framed photos of Kalen at every age, gap-toothed on a tricycle, and lanky in a high school graduation gown, grinning beside me at our first Christmas together. The air smelled of cinnamon and lemon polish. Normal, safe, the kind of space where problems were supposed to feel solvable. We sat at her kitchen table, the same Formica surface where Kalen had done homework as a kid, where Linda had probably cried after his father left, where she'd later celebrated his first freelance paycheck with takeout Chinese. History lived in this room, and now, so would our shame. Linda didn't waste time. She poured coffee into thick ceramic mugs, set a plate of coffee cake between us, and then folded her hands on the table. "Show me everything," she said to Kalen. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice of a woman who'd raised a child alone after her husband walked out with his secretary and never looked back. He pulled out his phone, opened a notes app where he'd spent Sunday night compiling every debt: the creditor, the balance, the interest rate, the minimum payment. He'd even color-coded it: red for past due, yellow for current but precarious, green for the 2 small accounts he'd actually been paying down. The total glowed on the screen between us, $16,219.47. Linda read it silently, nodded once. Then she stood up and walked to a small desk in the corner of the kitchen, returning with a checkbook and a calculator. "I've been setting aside money," she said, not looking up as she scribbled numbers. "Not much. 200 a month since last winter. I knew something was wrong when you stopped asking about my garden." She glanced at Kaylin, a sad smile touching her lips. "You always asked about my roses. Then suddenly, nothing. Nah, just, how are you, Mom, with that tightness around your eyes?" She slid a piece of paper across the table. A handwritten list of dates and amounts, $2,400 total. Kaylin stared at it like it might burn him. "You've been saving for me? All this time?" "I've been saving for the moment you were ready to face it," she corrected gently. "There's a difference." Tears welled in his eyes again, but he blinked them back. "I can't take that money, Mom. It's your retirement." "It's my choice to make," she said firmly. "And I'm not giving it to you outright. We're going to use it to consolidate the highest interest debts, the credit cards at 28%. Then you and Zuri will pay me back at 0 interest over 2 years. $100 a month. That's non-negotiable." He opened his mouth to protest, but she held up a hand. "Kaylin Michael, I am your mother. I have watched you try to carry the weight of the world since you were 12 years old, and your father taught you that love is conditional on success. You do not get to refuse my help now, not when I'm offering it with clear boundaries." The specificity of her words, the 0 interest, the 2-year timeline, the exact monthly amount, made it feel less like charity and more like a real plan. Like she was treating him like an adult who'd made mistakes, not a child who needed rescuing. Then she turned to me. "And you, Zuri, I saw what you did last week." My blood ran cold. "What I did?" She reached for her own phone, tapped the screen a few times, and slid it toward me. It was a screenshot of a Venmo transaction. My name, my profile picture, the transfer of $3,000 to an account labeled Zuri_emergency, dated last Thursday. I got a notification," she said softly. "Kaylin set up alerts on the joint account after the first overdraft. He never told you, did he?" I looked at Kaylin. His face had gone pale. He shook his head slowly. "I was going to... I just... You were waiting for the right moment," I finished, my voice hollow. The betrayal I'd felt when I discovered his lies now had a mirror image. My own deception, exposed not by accident, but by deliberate surveillance. He'd been watching my transactions, tracking my movements in our shared financial life like I was a suspect. "I wasn't spying on you," he said, reading my expression correctly. "I was trying to understand my own patterns, to see where the money was going so I could fix it. The alert for your transfer. It just appeared. I didn't go looking for it. But the damage was done. The fragile trust we'd rebuilt over the weekend cracked again. Not shattered, but fissured. I looked at Linda's phone screen, at the evidence of my own secrecy, and felt sick. I judged him for hiding debt while I'd been hiding money. Two sides of the same coin. Two people so afraid of being seen as flawed that we'd chosen deception over vulnerability. "I set up the account because I was scared," I said to Linda, my voice barely above a whisper. Not of him, of disappearing, of becoming someone who couldn't pay her own bills because she was too busy bailing out her partner. Linda nodded slowly. "I understand that fear. I lived it for 10 years after Richard left." She looked between us, her gaze steady. "But here's what you both need to hear. You cannot build a life on secrets, not financial ones, not emotional ones. And every lie you tell each other, even the ones meant to protect, is a brick in a wall between you. And eventually, that wall becomes too high to climb over." She stood up and refilled our coffee mugs. "So here's what we're going to do. Today we make a real budget, not the color-coded fantasy Zuri made that nobody followed. A real one, with Kaylin's actual income, Zuri's actual income, every debt payment, every utility. We put the $2,400 toward the Capital One and Amex cards. We set up automatic transfers so neither of you can forget to pay bills. And," she looked directly at me, "Zuri, you close that separate account. Not because you were wrong to protect yourself, but because protection shouldn't be necessary in a partnership. If it is, you fix the partnership. Not hide from it." I wanted to argue, to explain that closing the account felt like surrendering my safety net. But the truth was, I'd already crossed a line. I'd chosen self-preservation over partnership. And while that impulse was human, understandable even, it wasn't sustainable for a relationship that was supposed to be built on mutual care. "Okay," I said softly. "Okay, I'll close it." Kaylin reached for my hand under the table. His fingers were warm, trembling slightly. "And I'll start seeing a therapist for the money stuff, the shame, all of it." Linda's eyes softened. "Good, I'll help you find someone." We spent the next 3 hours at that kitchen table, spreadsheets on laptops, calculators clicking, coffee going cold and being reheated. We built a budget that was brutally honest. $4,200 in combined monthly income after taxes, $2,150 for rent, my $600 for utilities and groceries, $800 for debt payments, $400 for transportation, $250 left for everything else. Eating out, dates, haircuts, the occasional new shirt. It was tight. It was uncomfortable, but it was real. When we finally stood to leave at 5:30 p.m., the sky had darkened to deep indigo. Linda hugged Kaylin again, longer this time, her cheek pressed to his shoulder. Then she turned to me and pulled me into an embrace that smelled like lavender detergent and cinnamon. "You're a good person, Zuri," she whispered into my ear. "But good people make mistakes. What matters is whether you face them together." She pulled back, her hand still on my shoulders. "Don't let pride steal your future, either of you." We drove home in silence, but it was a different silence than before. Not heavy with unspoken things, no, but quiet with processing. Halfway home, Kalen reached over and laced his fingers through mine. I'm sorry I set up the alerts, he said softly. I should have told you. I'm sorry I opened the account without talking to you first, I said. I should have said I was scared instead of hiding. We pulled into our driveway. The house looked the same. Same blue door, same potted succulents by the steps, same faint glow from the street lamp filtering through the oak tree. But everything had changed. The debt was still there. The overdraft fees still stung. But we were no longer alone in the dark with it. I closed the secret account that night, transferred the $3,000 back into my personal checking, then set up the automatic split. 70% to joint, 30% to personal that we'd agreed on with Linda's guidance. Each click of the mouse felt like a small death and a small rebirth. I was giving up my escape route, betting on us. Kalen stayed up until 2 a.m., drafting emails to creditors, negotiating payment plans, his laptop glowing in the dark living room. I fell asleep on the couch beside him, my head on his shoulder, the scent of his shampoo, coconut, and mint filling my senses. I woke up Wednesday morning to my phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. A text from Maya. OMG Zuri, is this you? Beneath it, a screenshot of a Reddit post. From r/am I the asshole. The title made my blood freeze. AITA for moving my paycheck into a separate account after my partner kept accidentally overdrawing our joint one. My username, throwaway but with my real first name in the post history, stared back at me from the screen. The post was detailed. He ain't too detailed. It mentioned the Venmo transfer to Jax_Ryder92, the bounced contact lens payment, the $275 poker tournament lie. Details only Kalen or I would know. And at the bottom, in bold, update. He found out. He says I've been planning to leave him. I haven't. I just needed to breathe. AITA? I sat bolt upright in bed, heart hammering. Kalen was already awake, standing in the doorway with his own phone in hand, his face ashen. Did you post this? I asked, my voice sharp with panic. No, he said, and the raw hurt in his eyes told me he was telling the truth. But someone did, and they know everything. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Maya. People are going DEFCON 1 on this. Comments are insane. Some saying you're a gold digger, others saying he's a financial abuser. It's blowing up. I opened Reddit with trembling hands. The post had 47,000 upvotes, 3,200 comments, and climbing by the second. Top comment, NTA, he's financially irresponsible and you protected yourself. End of story. Reply, YTA, you violated trust. If he's bad with money, leave him. Don't secretly hoard cash like a squirrel preparing for winter while he starves. Another top comment, this is financial abuse both ways. He's reckless with shared funds. She's deceptive with her own. They need counseling yesterday. Reply, she's not abusive, she's smart. Men get away with this shit all the time. Women get called controlling for having a savings account. My vision blurred as I scrolled. Strangers were dissecting our relationship, their judgment sharp and absolute. They didn't know about Linda's $2,400. They didn't know about the shoebox of unopened bills. And they didn't know about the quiet moment on her kitchen floor when Kalen finally admitted he was drowning. They just saw a story, and they were picking sides like it was a sport. Then I saw it. A comment posted 20 minutes ago from a user named TruthTeller88. For anyone wondering, yes, this is real. I know them both. Her name is Zuri, his is Kalen. They live in Pasadena. She works at a tech company doing UX design, LOL. He's a freelance designer, which means he plays video games all day and blames his mom when money runs out. She's been complaining about him to her friends for months. This post is just her way of getting internet validation before she dumps him. Watch. My blood turned to ice. I knew that phrasing. Lowell. The air quotes around job titles, the casual cruelty disguised as concern. I showed the comment to Kalen. His face went from pale to gray. Leo, he whispered. It has to be Leo. But it wasn't Leo. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered on autopilot. Zuri? A woman's voice, familiar, hesitant. Yes? It's Janet, Maya's sister. The world tilted. Janet, the quiet, seemingly sweet woman who'd hosted our couple's game night last month, who'd asked me about my student loans with what I thought was genuine interest, who'd hugged me goodbye and said, "You're so strong," handling all that, with tears in her eyes. What did you do, Janet? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. A pause, then quietly. I was trying to help you. By doxing me on Reddit? By telling strangers where I live? I didn't give your address, she said, voice rising. I saw how miserable you were. Maya told me about the overdrafts. About you crying in her bathroom at Dev's birthday party last month. I thought if the internet called him out, he'd finally get his act together. For your sake. You don't get to decide what's best for my relationship, I said, each word precise and cold. You don't get to expose my private life to thousands of strangers because you think you're helping. I'm sorry, she whispered. I went through this with Mark. The financial stuff. I lost my house because I trusted him. I couldn't watch you make the same mistake. The justification hung in the air between us. Well-intentioned, deeply misguided, utterly violating. She saw herself as a protector. I saw her as an invader. Both truths existed simultaneously. I hung up without saying goodbye. Kalen was standing by the window, staring out at the street. His phone was in his hand. Night screen dark. People know where we live, Zuri. What if someone shows up? They won't, I said, though I wasn't sure. It's just an internet mob. They'll forget about us by tomorrow. But they didn't. By noon, the post had 120,000 upvotes. Someone created a subreddit dedicated to Team Zuri versus Team Kalen. Memes appeared. Photoshopped images of me as a superhero holding a shield labeled financial responsibility. Kalen as a cartoon villain dropping coins into a bottomless pit. A TikTok compilation of signs your partner is financially abusive used our story as the prime example, set to ominous music. Strangers left comments on both our Instagram photos from 6 months ago. Hope you learned your lesson, Zuri, and get a real job, Kaylin lol. At 3:17 p.m., a black sedan slowed in front of our house, not stopping, just crawling past. Yeah, then another. An hour later, a woman in her 20s got out of a Prius down the street, took a photo of our house with her phone, and drove away. Kaylin pulled the blinds shut. We sat in the dim living room, the glow of our phones casting shadows on our faces as we scrolled through the carnage. The internet had taken our messy human struggle and flattened it into a morality play. Hero and villain, right and wrong, no nuance allowed. I can't do this, Kaylin whispered, his voice breaking. I can't have strangers judging me for my worst moments. I can't have people thinking I'm abusive. You're not abusive, I said fiercely. You're flawed. There's a difference. But they don't see that, he said, tears finally spilling over. They see a guy who overdrew an account. Well, they don't see the kid whose dad left because he wasn't successful enough. They don't see the shame that makes me lie about $275 because I'm terrified of disappointing the woman I love. They just see a fuck up. And honestly, he looked at me, his eyes raw. Sometimes I agree with them. I crossed the room and knelt in front of him, taking his face in my hands. Listen to me. The internet is a funhouse mirror. It distorts everything it touches. What's happening online is not real life. Real life is us sitting here right now, choosing to face this together instead of running. But even as I said it, a notification popped up on my phone. An email from my boss. Zuri, saw the Reddit post. Let's talk when you're back in the office tomorrow. HR wants to be present. The ground fell out from under me. It wasn't just online anymore. Mine, it was bleeding into everything. My job, my reputation, my future. Kaylin saw my face change. What is it? I showed him the email. He went very still. Then he stood up and walked to the front door, peering through the blinds. They're not going to forget about us tomorrow, he said softly. This is going to follow us, for months, maybe years. I stood beside him, looking out at our quiet street, the same street where we'd carried groceries laughing just 3 weeks ago, where we'd argued about whose turn it was to take out the recycling, where we'd built a life that now felt exposed and fragile as glass. What do we do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He turned to me, his eyes holding a resolve I hadn't seen before. We get through today, then tomorrow, then the next day, and we decide, really decide, if this is a life we want to build together. Not because the internet says we should or shouldn't, but because we choose each other, despite everything. Outside, another car slowed as it passed. We both flinched. The world had become hostile overnight. And in that moment, I realized the hardest truth of all. The monster wasn't just the debt or the secrets or even the Reddit post. The monster was the choice we now had to make. Whether to let this break us or to let it forge us into something stronger. And I had no idea which path we'd take. The HR meeting was worse than I expected and better than I feared. My boss, Sarah, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a reputation for cutting through corporate bullshit, met me in a small conference room with a box of tissues already on the table. See, not because she thought I'd cry, but because she knew I might need them. First things first, she said, closing the door. You're not in trouble. Your job is secure. But we need to talk about digital footprint. She slid her laptop toward me. On screen was the Reddit post, now at 217,000 upvotes, with a comment pinned by moderators. Reminder, doxing is against Reddit rules. Do not share names, locations, or workplaces. Beneath it, dozens of comments had been deleted. But not all. Someone had screenshotted my LinkedIn profile before I'd set it to private Tuesday night. My company name was visible in the corner. Someone from marketing flagged it this morning, Sarah said gently. They were worried about brand association, not because of the content, because of the attention. Internet mobs don't care about nuance. Like they see a company name attached to drama and they show up. I stared at my hands. I didn't post it. Someone else did. A friend of a friend. I know, she said. Maya told Dev, who told me, Janet's sister. She's mortified, by the way, called HR herself this morning to confess. The betrayal stung fresh. Janet, sweet Janet, who'd brought homemade soup when I had the flu last winter, who'd listened patiently when I vented about wedding planning stress with her own sister. She'd weaponized my pain because she thought she was saving me. The line between care and control had never felt so thin. What happens now? I asked. Sarah leaned forward. You take today off. Tomorrow you come back and do your job. We've instructed the front desk not to release your name to visitors. IT is monitoring for unusual traffic to your work email. And she paused, choosing her words carefully. If Kaylin needs a reference for freelance work in the next few months, have him contact me directly. Sometimes these things follow men differently than women. He might need backup. I looked up, startled. You're protecting him too? I'm protecting my employee's peace, she said simply. That includes her home life. Now go home, be with him. And Zuri? She held my gaze. Don't let the internet decide the value of your relationship. That's between you and him, no one else. I walked out of the office at 11:47 a.m. into a day that felt both ordinary and alien. The sun shone, cars passed, a man walked his golden retriever down the sidewalk, normal life continuing while mine had been splashed across the internet for strangers to dissect. My phone buzzed. Kaylin, how'd it go? Not fired? I texted back. HR was actually cool, more worried about internet mobs than my secret account. Thank God. A pause. Then, Leo just called. Someone recognized me at the climbing gym. Guy said, hey, aren't you that Reddit guy? While I was halfway up the wall. Had to come home. My stomach dropped. That Reddit guy. Reduced to a meme. A cautionary tale. I pictured him on that climbing wall, strong, focused, in his element. Then the voice cutting through his concentration, the sudden awareness of being watched not as Kaylin, but as a character in someone else's story. I called him instead of texting. He answered on the first ring, voice thick. I can't leave the house, he said quietly. I tried to go to the co-working space, and I saw two people pointing at their phones while looking at me. I turned around and came back. Stay home, I said. I'm on my way. We'll order takeout. Watch bad TV. Ignore the world for one day. But ignoring the world wasn't an option. When I pulled into our driveway, a white envelope was tucked under our welcome mat. No stamp, no return address, just my name, Zuri, written in neat cursive. Inside a single sheet of paper. I'm sorry. I thought I was helping. I've deleted my Reddit account and reported the post for doxing. I won't contact you again unless you reach out first. But please know, I never meant to hurt you. I just saw my own pain in yours and tried to shortcut your healing. That was arrogant. Forgive me or don't. But I hope you find your way back to each other. Janet. I stood on the porch for a full minute, the paper trembling in my hand. Not a defense, not an excuse. An apology that took full ownership. Unflawed people trying their best. That was the theme of my entire life lately. Janet hadn't been a villain, just a wounded person projecting her trauma onto mine. The realization didn't erase the violation, but it softened its edges. Inside, Kaylin was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor surrounded by open laptops. His, mine, Linda's old tablet she'd lent us. Spreadsheets glowed on every screen. He looked up when I entered, his face pale but focused. I've been thinking, he said. We can't control the internet, but we can control our response. I drafted a statement. Not for Reddit. I'm not feeding that beast, but for our friends, for our families. A simple truth. We're working through financial challenges together. We appreciate your support and ask for privacy while we do. I sat beside him, reading the draft on his screen. Short. How dignified. No blame. No justification. Just a boundary wrapped in gratitude. Send it, I said. He hit send to our close contacts list. 23 people. Within minutes, replies flooded in. Maya, I'm so sorry my sister did that. I had no idea. Call me when you're ready. Dev, need groceries dropped off? No questions asked. Linda, proud of you both. Come for dinner Sunday. Even Leo. Dude, I'm sorry people are assholes. You're a good guy. Let me know if you need work. No one asked for details. No one took sides. They just showed up with quiet support. The contrast to the Reddit comments, YTA for not leaving his broke ass, and NTA, he's using you for financial stability, was staggering. Real people offered grace. Strangers offered verdicts. I knew which world I wanted to live in. That evening, when after takeout containers were stacked in the recycling bin and the TV played some forgettable sitcom neither of us was watching, Kaylin turned to me on the couch. I applied for a part-time job today, he said quietly. At that design agency downtown, the one with steady hours and benefits. It's less money than I make freelancing in a good month. But it's reliable. No more waiting for invoices. I studied his face, the tension around his mouth, the new lines at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago. This wasn't surrender. It was strategy. A man choosing stability over ego. I'm proud of you, I said, and meant it. He took my hand. I also called a therapist, got an appointment for Thursday. Money stuff, shame stuff, all of it. Tears pricked my eyes. Not sad tears. I ain't the kind that come when you see someone you love, choose courage over comfort. I closed the secret account this morning, I said. Transferred everything back. Set up the automatic split we agreed on with your mom. He squeezed my fingers. And? And I'm scared, I admitted. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. We sat in silence for a long time, hands clasped between us, the glow of the television painting shifting colors across our skin. Outside, the world still buzzed with strangers dissecting our lives. But in here, in this room with a lavender-scented candle burning low on the mantle and the faint smell of garlic from our dinner lingering in the air, we were just two people choosing each other again. Not perfectly, not easily, but deliberately. The next morning, I woke before my alarm and checked Reddit one last time. The post had been removed, moderators finally enforcing the doxing rule after hundreds of reports. The internet had already moved on to a new drama, a celebrity breakup, a political scandal, a viral cat video. We were yesterday's news. Forgotten. And in that forgetting, I found a strange gift, the freedom to rebuild without an audience. No one was watching to see if we'd make it. No one was keeping score. Just us, our debt, our shame, our love. All of it messy and human and ours alone again. Kaylin stirred beside me, mumbling something about coffee. I kissed his shoulder and slipped out of bed. In the kitchen, I filled the kettle and pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet, the chipped blue one he loved, the speckled white one my mom had given me. Ordinary objects in an ordinary morning. But as the kettle began to whistle, a sound so simple and domestic it felt like a promise, I realized something. We weren't fixed. The debt remained. The trust was still fragile, but we were choosing to stay in the fire together instead of running. And sometimes, maybe most times, that's the only victory available. Not perfection, just presence. Not a clean resolution, just the daily, difficult work of showing up. The kettle screamed. I turned off the burner and poured the water, watching the steam rise between us like a small, quiet prayer. 8 months later, the debt wasn't gone. It never really is, not all the way, but it had shrunk. $16,219 had become $9,843. The shoebox of statements now lived in a filing cabinet, organized by date, each payment logged in Kaylin's meticulous new spreadsheet. Blabbering he'd gotten the job at the design agency, $62,000 a year, health insurance, 401k matching. Some days he missed the freedom of freelancing, the thrill of landing a big client out of nowhere. But most days he came home at 6:15 p.m. with groceries already in his bag because he'd stopped at the market on his way home, and the predictability felt like a gift. We'd moved apartments, not because we had to, but because the old place had started to feel haunted. Every creak of the floorboards reminded me of that Tuesday afternoon when I discovered the overdraft. Every time I pulled into the driveway, I half expected to see another stranger taking photos of our house. The new place was smaller, a one-bedroom with thin walls and a fire escape that looked straight into our neighbor's kitchen. But it was ours alone. No ghosts, no history. Like just blank walls waiting for us to fill them. Kalen still saw his therapist every other Thursday. I'd started going too. Not because I had his kind of shame around money, but because I realized my rigidity was its own kind of prison. Dr. Evans called it security trauma, the immigrant child's hypervigilance mistaken for virtue. I'd spent so long believing that control equaled safety that I'd forgotten how to be soft. How to trust that some things, like love, can't be spreadsheeted into existence. One Saturday morning in early June, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Kalen humming in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the window we'd finally hung curtains on last week. Thick navy fabric that blocked the streetlights and made the room feel like a sanctuary. I padded out barefoot to find him at the counter, chopping strawberries with a focus usually reserved for design mock-ups. "Morning," he said without turning around. "I was thinking we could go to the farmer's market later, get peaches, make that crisp you like." I leaned against the counter and watched his hands. Sure, deliberate, no longer trembling when he handled a knife. The hands that had once hidden debt statements now chopped fruit for a dessert we'd eat together on the fire escape, watching the neighborhood kids chase each other down the sidewalk. "You're in a good mood," I said. He glanced at me, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Had a dream last night. Weird one. We were old, like really old, and sitting on a porch somewhere with mountains in the distance. You were knitting something lopsided. I was complaining about my knees. And we were happy. Just quiet happy, not performative, not trying to prove anything to anyone." I poured coffee into my mug. "Sounds nice?" "It was," he said softly. And when I woke up, I realized something. We're not building toward that future. We're already in it. Just the early draft version. The words settled in my chest like warmth. We weren't waiting to be fixed before we could be happy. We were learning to be happy while still broken, while still paying off debt, while still flinching sometimes when the bank notification pops up on our phones. Later that afternoon, we walked to the farmer's market hand in hand. Not because it was romantic, though it was, but because after everything, touch had become our language. A hand on a shoulder while washing dishes, fingers laced in the car at red lights, the quiet press of a forehead against a back during a movie. We were relearning each other's bodies as sites of safety rather than suspicion. At the market, Kalen bought peaches from a woman with sun-leathered skin and a kind smile. He paid with cash, $8.50 exact, and slipped the receipt into his wallet without me asking. A small thing, a nothing thing. But it was everything. On the walk home, a notification popped up on my phone. A Reddit Digest email, something I'd forgotten to unsubscribe from months ago. My thumb hovered over delete, then on impulse I opened it. There it was. A single line buried between posts about gaming and cooking. R/relationships. Update, we're still together. It's hard, but it's ours. I stopped walking. Kalen turned, eyebrows raised. "You okay?" I showed him the screen. He read it slowly. His expression unreadable. Then he looked up, his eyes glistening. "I posted that last week," he said quietly. "Anonymous account. Just needed to say it somewhere. Not for validation. Just to mark the spot, like a trail marker." I slipped my phone back into my pocket. Took his hand again. "What did the comments say?" He shrugged. "Mostly, glad you're working on it. A few y'all should have split. One guy said we're both codependent narcissists." He squeezed my fingers. I didn't read past the first page. We kept walking. The sun warmed our shoulders. A breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine from someone's garden. Ordinary. Beautiful. Ours. That night, after the peach crisp had been eaten and the dishes washed and put away, we sat on the fire escape as dusk settled over the city. The sky bled from orange to deep violet. Now, somewhere down the street, a couple argued in hushed tones. A baby cried. Life happening in all its messy, uncurated glory. Kalen rested his head on my shoulder. "Do you ever think about that Reddit post?" He asked softly. "The one that started it all?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Usually when I see a notification from an app I don't recognize, my stomach still drops for a second." "Me too," he said. "But then I remember we survived it. Not because we were perfect, but because we chose to stay." I thought about all the versions of us that had existed in the past year. The US who lied to protect each other, the US who hid money out of fear, the US who broke down in Linda's kitchen, the US who faced an internet mob and didn't run. None of those versions were wrong. They were just steps. Necessary, painful, non-human steps towards something sturdier. "I don't regret the secret account," I said after a long silence. "Not really. It was a survival move, and survival isn't shameful." "I don't regret the debt either," he said, surprising me. "Not the having it. The hiding it, yeah, that hurt you. But the debt itself, it taught me I can't carry everything alone. That's a lesson I needed." We sat there as the stars emerged one by one above the city lights. No grand declarations, no promises of forever, just two people breathing the same air, shoulders touching, watching the world turn without them. And in that quiet moment, I understood something I'd been too afraid to name before. Love isn't the absence of brokenness. It's the decision to hold the pieces together anyway, not to make them whole again, but to create something new from the cracks, in something stronger at the broken places. Kalen shifted beside me, his hand finding mine in the gathering dark. Our fingers intertwined, calloused, imperfect, familiar. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a threat. It just felt like morning, waiting to happen. Kalen's fingers tightened around mine as a breeze swept up from the street, carrying the distant laughter of children and the hum of a city settling into evening. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The silence between us had transformed over these months, from something heavy with unspoken fears to something spacious enough to hold both our scars and our hope. I thought about the version of me who'd sat in that grocery store parking lot 8 months ago, white knuckling the steering wheel, wondering if I should just drive away and never look back. She'd been so certain that love should feel safe, that trust should be unbreakable, that the right person would never make you question your own stability. She hadn't known yet that safety isn't the absence of danger. It's the presence of someone who stays when things fall apart. That trust isn't a fortress you build once and lock the doors on. It's a garden you tend daily, even after the frost. That the right person isn't the one who never stumbles, but the one who reaches for your hand when they do. Kalen shifted beside me, his shoulder pressing warm against mine. You know, he said softly, I looked up that Jax_Ryder 9-2 guy last week, out of curiosity. I turned to him, surprised. And? He's Leo's cousin. Wasn't even a real poker tournament. Ain't just Leo trying to front money for his cousin's bail. He let out a quiet breath that wasn't quite a laugh, wasn't quite a sigh. I blocked both of them, changed my Venmo privacy settings, did all the things I should have done a year ago. I rested my head against his temple. I know. I'm not that guy anymore, Zuri. I know that too. We sat there until the streetlights flickered on, one by one down the block, painting gold pools on the pavement below, until the air grew cool enough that I shivered, and he wrapped his arm around my shoulders without being asked, until the last sliver of sun vanished behind the buildings and the first star appeared, a pinprick of light in the violet sky. And in that moment, with his heartbeat steady against my ear and the taste of peaches still sweet on my tongue, might I realize the truth I'd been circling for months. We would never be the couple from the beginning again, the couple who believed love was enough to float on. But we were becoming something else, something quieter, sturdier, a couple who knew the weight of water and had learned to swim anyway. He stood up slowly, offering me his hand. I took it, not because I needed help rising, but because I wanted to feel his palm against mine one more time before we went inside. Before we washed the dishes and brushed our teeth and climbed into bed where we'd lie facing each other in the dark, knees touching, breathing the same air until morning. I squeezed his fingers once before letting go, and as we stepped back through the window into our small, imperfect, entirely ours apartment, I finally understood that the most radical act of love isn't protecting someone from falling. It's being there to catch them when they do, and having the courage to fall yourself, knowing they'll be there too. The future was still uncertain. The debt would take years to erase. Some days would still be hard. But as I closed the window against the night air and turned to face him in the warm light of our kitchen, I knew with a certainty that needed no spreadsheet or promise to validate it, we were going to be okay. Not because we'd fixed everything, but because we'd learned how to hold each other while we broke. And that, it turned out, was the only foundation that ever really lasts.